Well, Father Dan, there is a error in our program this morning in that it says that I'm doing the homily, but we've decided that we both are going to do this as a dialogue today.
I thought I was just along for the ride.
Well, so if you don't know what a dialogue homily is, think of podcast, and that's what we're kind of doing today, that sort of style. Today what we're doing in church is very bizarre, if you think about it, very countercultural. The fact that all of us are filling this building today and coming to this place with all this fanfare and the beautiful music and making a statement about something. We live in a culture where being a Christian is increasingly countercultural. And if we were to go out on the streets of Los Angeles and think about all the different things that people believe about their spirituality, and in particular about, if we asked a question about what happens when you die, we would probably get, for 100 people, we get 100 different answers. Anything from, well, you know, we'll be buried and we'll come back in that whatever remains of us will turn into plants and flowers or whatever, or else reincarnation, or some strange thing about maybe someplace beyond there's some sort of sense of an afterlife. But what we're saying today is something very, very different, as our story tells us this morning that we heard being narrated in the Gospel of St. John about what we are doing here today. And I'm struck when I think about this story because it takes me back to a few chapters before, in the 11th chapter of John's Gospel. It's a gospel story that we often read at funerals. And that is when Jesus is there at the grave of his friend Lazarus. And Lazarus' sister Martha comes to Jesus and said, you know, Lord, if you had been here, my brother might not have died. And Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. And then he asks a question, do you believe this? Well, many years ago when I was a new priest, I had the privilege of officiating at a funeral of a young man in his 20s who had died of cancer. And at that funeral, when I was reading that gospel, I said that passage, and then I said Jesus' words, you know, do you believe this? And I happened to look up when I said that from the gospel, do you believe this? And there was a woman right in the front row, I don't know if it was a relative, an aunt, or whatever it was. She said, yes, I do, in the middle of the gospel. As if maybe I was asking a question, but what was so striking about that moment was that in that moment, those words of Jesus connected with her life. This wasn't just, I'm going to be a petunia when I got into the ground. It was about something real, about what she believed in her life. And if we were to go on with that story, we would find out that Martha's answer was, I believe, Jesus, that you are the Messiah. Not that, like, you know, I believe that you will, or a whole bunch of theology, but I believe in you, I trust in you. And what we're saying here today is that when we come to the end of our lives, everything about us is going to be taken up into the life of God. There will be nothing left out. Even Jesus, when he was raised, he had nail marks in his hands, because the sufferings and the sorrows of our life will all be taken up and transformed. And there is going to be a great getting up warning one day when you and I will be raised up in our flesh. This world is beautiful, and it will be redeemed and transformed, and you and your body are beautiful, and you will be transformed. You will live forever in your body. That's what we're saying, not just some weird incorporeal spirit someplace. But this world will be transformed in the new creation that started on this day in a little garden outside Jerusalem.
Have you ever gone to a conference and they want to use like an icebreaker, and they say something like, what is the worst job you ever had? Have anyone ever asked you that?
No.
Okay.
Have they asked you?
Yes, they have. Thank you. They have. And my answer would be, I had wonderful employment at a church in New York City. But as part of that employment, I had a job that I initially thought would be the worst job I could ever have. But it taught me a lot about gratitude, about our fascination with our own bodies, with really at the end a fear of letting go of this and not being able to move into the new order of things. And that church had a columbarium. They had a brand new columbarium. And we were meeting with the representative who was going to build the columbarium, my boss and myself. And he explained to us that people, when they have remains, usually buy a very elaborate urn. Well, the urn will not fit in the columbarium. And so you had to take the ashes out of the urn and put it in sort of this mailbox thing and put it in the columbarium. And so the guy says, well, you need to have someone that will do that. And my boss just said, oh, Father Dan will do that. And I said, I will? I said, I can't do that. I can't do that. And he said, and he was right. He said, it's a priestly job. But I made this mistake of placing my anxiety upon the dead, where I should have placed my anxiety upon the living. Because the other part of that job, and this was so instructive to me, was to help people choose where they were going to go in this columbarium. And it instructed to me that people wanted sort of prime real estate. They wanted people to be able to see them, to see their name. They didn't want to be way up high. I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered. And the other thing was, which surprised me, but this is part of the brokenness of the human condition, there was a lot of, well, who's next to me? Oh, no, not her. No. I had someone move 3 times. And I finally had to say, ma'am, this is a columbarium. It's not a gated community. I mean, you're just going to have to go with this, but we can't let go of our bodies. And there were 2 lessons for me, a lesson from the living and a lesson from the dead. So I learned how to do that. And I would transfer the ashes. And here's what I learned. If you are rich or you are poor, if you are highly educated or you are not, if you are very faithful or not, if you are young or old, if you are black or white or Latino or Muslim or Asian or any ethnicity, all of us go down to the dust. Eventually, we are a bag of dust. Everyone here will be a bag of dust. There is a place on the face of the earth where someday my remains will rest. There's a place someday where your remains will rest. Might be in a church, might be in a cemetery, might be the bottom of the ocean, but there's a place. The lesson that I learned from the living, and I thought about this a lot. There was a woman there who bought a niche, and she had her name put on it with her birth date. And this is a very prominent place. And it was on a hallway where you would walk to coffee hour every day. And I said, what is that like for you? And she's told me the most amazing thing. She said, it grounds me in gratitude. It grounds me in gratitude. You know, we started this whole process 40 days ago of saying, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. But today, we want to be like the women at the tomb. We want to run away and run to the good news and get busy with all the stuff of church, but go to brunch, go to see, maybe there's an Easter bunny coming, I don't know. We want to run away from that. But we should not run so quickly. We should sit by the empty tomb. Because, as I said, it's everybody's end. And we just expect that it won't be. We have to realize that God has actively seized the human condition and changed it forever. Our end should be in the grave, but it's not. God has actively done that. As the hymn says, for millions and for me. You know, we talk about the individualisticness of American culture, and so maybe today this could be a quick correction just so we can sit with ourselves for a minute. I mean, think of that woman, week in, week out, grounded in gratitude for what God has done for her. God has seized death so that she might live. You know, we've talked again and again and again about Psalm 118, and it's on Palm Sunday, where we talk about the messianic kingdom breaking in with Jesus. We sing gorgeously today in Anglican chant about the victory of God over death. But as we said on Maundy Thursday, this psalm is sung in a hidden way. Scholars tell us that it might be the very last thing that Jesus sung. And he sings of the steadfast love of God as he goes to his death, as he faces fear, as he fears leaving the power of his body, the anxiety of all of that, the betrayal of his friends, all of that, messianic hope, absolute victory. But God's victory is grounded, firmly grounded in human fear and anxiety about death. And God seizes that and brings us all life. So for the worst job I ever had, I had great learnings.
Well, that's a wonderful story about having to handle the actual dust of people.
Well,
right?
one last thing.
Yeah.
Before the lockdown, we were having a discussion about having a columbarium. And the representative came, and I thought to myself, well, I hope Father Mark knows that he's going to be happy to transfer all the ashes, because I've had that lesson. I have it already.
I think that woman's experience really, and that woman that I encountered at that funeral, really talks about the real connection that people make with this story, that we believe it. To believe isn't to assent to a set of things that we read in the creed. To believe is to believe, to trust in Jesus. That's what it's about, that we believe that the risen one is here, is
Right.
with us, that we can actually trust in the presence of Jesus Christ, who is alive today and that can transform our lives. Because I think for a lot of us, we come here today and we might think sometimes that that was all very nice for Jesus. What does it really have to do with me, right? And the reason that we're here today is that it has something to do with us. Sometimes I think that we effectively believe that Jesus is still in the tomb. And what I mean by that is that, that the resurrection of Jesus doesn't have any real significance or purpose for us in our lives, right?
It changes everything.
It changes everything. If you really believe in that person who was raised from the dead, not just a figure 2,000 years ago, but the one who started a whole movement, a new creation, a brand new world that can change your life and mine for millions and for me, that is good news. Because today, what we can think about is that if you think back on your life, what are all the wounds that you have? How have you been wounded in your life? What wounds do you still carry in your mind and your body? And just think that those things, if you bring them to Jesus, can be gloriously transformed. Just like the wounds on his body were gloriously transformed. I know that I have wounds, and I bet you do too. in your life. You have been wounded in some way. And the point of today is not just what's going to happen after you die, but that right now, you and I can step into the new creation. We can be part of that new creation now. We can receive that Jesus who died and rose again, and who can transform our lives and transform all of that woundedness if we bring it before him.
That's what that woman was doing. She's daily stepping into the new creation.
That's right, because she knew,
She knew.
that bag of dust was not the last word.
Right.
Right. So, church, today we say, as we've said again and again, Alleluia, Christ is risen. The
Hallelujah. The Lord is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Alleluia.